Hello and welcome back. Today I'm here with Kenny and Satoshi Miyagawa. They are the co-founders and co-CEOs of LaunchStarz, a company that helps Japanese startups innovate in America. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great. Thanks so much for having us on the show.
Thank you. Can you give us a little bit of your history and then also like what LaunchStarz is?
Sure. Do you want to start?
Hey, go ahead, bro.
For our history, we actually started as friends about 4 years ago. Satoshi actually moved to LA in the middle of the pandemic, and through common friends, we actually met each other in the park.
Mm-hmm.
And while we were in the park, because no restaurants were open and everything was on lockdown, we started talking about our passion for startups. And it actually started at noon, and we ended up finishing at midnight.
It's 12 hours straight.
12 hours straight of the park and going over to a friend's house and in amazing Japanese style, drinking until about 10, and we opened up our LinkedIn profiles and realized there's like 100 people in common.
Yeah.
And that's where we started to talk about startups and how in the future we'd like to create a company that helps Japanese startups, especially going to the US launch. And I think I can turn it over to you for a little bit more of the background.
Oh yeah, for sure. So hi, this is Satoshi, and thanks for having me here. So I was born in Japan, actually, which is in Kumamoto, which is a western area of Japan. And when I turned 3, I moved to Belgium.
Oh, wow.
Then I spent 1 year there. Then I moved to New York in America, and I spent 4 years. And at that time, I had my first aha moment in my life. So the teacher in my elementary school told me, Satoshi, you have a great leadership and will, so keep it up. So that made me super happy. But after when I came back to Japan, the Japanese teacher told me, Satoshi, you have to be more cooperative with your friends in Japan. So that was 180 degrees different feedback I got, while I didn't change anything when I was like 9 years boy. But that made me, think of I was very interested in the global market or different cultures or people with different thoughts. So from that time, I think I was interested in going global when I grew up. So after then, I spent my time in Japan, especially near Tokyo, and I went to one of the biggest corporate starting my career. Actually, I majored in computer science, because I love coding and I made websites and codes. When I got my Windows 98, I was so excited. So I decided to major computer science. But when I went to college, I realized I love people more than computers. So I pivoted my career into business side. And I had some small dream that I wanted to become a global leader in the future. So I thought that a leader should be good at sales. So I was looking for some positions that I can learn sales, especially B2B and B2Cs. But at that time in 2004, finance industry was the only companies that hired the bachelor degrees engineering guy as a sales. Because in Japan, it's common to hire the very general hiring for the fresh guys, and they do the internal jinji ido, which is like how do you call job rotation. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I started my career in the finance industry, which was the biggest, one of the non-life insurance company called Tokyo Marine. So I spent like 12 years in total, but during my career, I had a chance to study business in Stanford, and that was my second aha moment. And at that time was 2012, and people and money and information was gathering in one place in Silicon Valley, and that made me think of I wanted to come here much earlier. And that moment changed my mind to become I want to be in the startup ecosystem. Also, when I reflect my career, I thought that something is wrong with Japanese education system. So my career aspiration become more geared towards the startup and go global, especially in America, and also focus on education. And then I changed my career into one of the edtech startup called LaunchStarz. So in my previous job, I was a CEO of the US arm of LaunchStarz, and that's why I moved to LA in 2020 during the pandemic. Yeah, and then I met with this guy out of nowhere.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that we kind of clicked is he's very international, growing up from the Japan side. And for me too, I have a lot of international experiences, kind of like complementing his experiences. So I was actually born in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And when I was 4, my parents immigrated to Vancouver. So I grew up in Vancouver, Canada. And when I first got there, I had the same kind of immigrant experience of learning English, understanding Canadian culture. So I ended up growing up in Vancouver, and after I graduated university, I was supposed to go do my MBA in UCLA. But a lot of my friends from University of British Columbia, where I went, they loved Japan. So they introduced me to Japanese culture. I had friends in Japan, so one of them was like, why don't you just take a year off and go visit? And I was like, well, coming from a family where my parents are super strict, especially for a Chinese family, I was supposed to be a doctor, dentist, or lawyer. My major was genetics and microbiology. So I actually negotiated to do an MBA, and that was like the compromise. So I went to them, I'm like, I'm thinking of going to Japan, just 1 year, let me go. And my dad's like, sure, no problem. My mom's like, promise me 1 year, and it extended to 14 years. Yeah. Yep, so my first year there, I did what every foreigner that could do when they first went to Japan, is be an English teacher. And I think that's something that we're working on now, is that there's a lot of Americans and Canadians that have an interest in Japan, but don't necessarily want to just come and be an English teacher. So we want to try to find new avenues for them, that maybe they could help Japanese startups. Maybe they could do something else in the industry here. Yeah, but for me, I had only one choice. I came as an English teacher, and then after my first year or so, I became an area manager for 52 GEOS schools. So back in the day, they had Eikawana GEOS. So I managed 52 schools, so every time a new foreign teacher came, I'd go pick them up from the airport, train them on how to teach, as well as how to sell textbooks and homestays. And through that, when I was 23 was when I had my first entrepreneurial experience. I started my own English school. And I had no idea what I was doing as a foreigner in Japan, trying to run an English school. But I had a really good partner who was another teacher, and I had an angel fund lady who used to be our student. So we ended up creating that English school, and we were very lucky. We got contracts from, at that time it's called Monbusho, or Monkasho, so it's the Board of Education for Japan. So we ended up teaching English to like professors in Kanazawa in the summertime. And we also got contracts with the local bunka centers, so the cultural centers. So every evening we had 20 obasans and oji-sans, like really nice downtown people come and learn English from us. But it ended up being not so much of English, but more of a cultural exchange, and it was just like a great experience to be doing that in my 3rd year in Japan. And after that, I started my real startup, and it was with my Japanese co-founder. We became a finalist in TechCrunch in 2009. And it started with a year before. My co-founder came to me and said, hey, did you see the Japanese company that pitched on stage at TechCrunch in 2008? Like, his product was amazing, but his English was terrible. And I don't want that to be the representation of Japanese startups. So he's like, let's work on this together. So yeah, we worked on our product. I did all of the applications and stuff, and we made it as a finalist. And that was, I think, when Satoshi had his aha moment. That was my aha moment when I got to Silicon Valley. It was like 2009, and everything was bright and amazing. And I'm like, I want to live here. I don't work here. So after we finished, we came back to Japan and ended up selling our company just for a little bit of money, but I think the experience was well worth it. And at that time, Groupon Japan was just starting here. So it was 2009, 2010. So Groupon Japan hired me as one of the first foreigners to help them localize. So that was a trip as well, because I thought Groupon Japan is going to be really international. But with me being like the second foreigner, everything was really, really, really Japanese. So like every day, it was probably similar to Tokyo Marine. I'd have a morning stand meeting. I'd have all my meetings in Japanese. I'd have to do like a daily nippo, so like a report at the end in Japanese of each day. I couldn't leave before my boss left at like 9 o'clock. So it was good learning for like a big corporation, and also understanding Japanese culture. Yeah, and after that I got transferred from Groupon Japan to Groupon Palo Alto. And it's a funny overlap or story is that when I worked for Groupon in Palo Alto, Satoshi was actually 4 blocks down the street at Stanford.
Yep.
But we had never met.
Nope.
But we had the same like stomping grounds, like Antonio's Nut House, where like everyone would go have drinks, or like Jinsho,
the sushi restaurant.
Yeah, famous sushi restaurant where Steve Jobs used to go. So it was kind of strange that we were probably there and we probably saw each other, but we hadn't met yet. And then, after Groupon, I also did other big tech companies like Amazon, Jive Software, and like Agoda, so Booking.com. And then in the States, I did my third startup, which is called Japan Crate. And Japan Crate, my wife was actually the co-founder. So at that time, I was working at Amazon, but in the evenings, every night, I would start talking more about Japan Crate than Amazon. So they hired me as the CEO. And Japan Crate was the OG of the Japanese snack subscription box business. So all the cool stuff you see in 7-Eleven, we would pack an awesome crate of like 32 different snacks and send it to everyone's doorstep. And for that one, Japan Crate was actually acquired by Boxu. So that was like a fun time to be a CEO of something exciting that's still tied back to Japan. And doing all that, after that, I still wanted to help Japanese startups. So it was kind of perfect timing when I met Satoshi. So 3 years ago, we really wanted to do something, but we had our own jobs. He was CEO at Life is Tech, and I was working for a property tech company called Zumper. And it was like the pandemic. So it was not a fun time to do any type of business, and not a good time to start any new business. So that's when we kind of like waited till the timing was right.
Yeah, and also we are lucky enough that not only us, but also our families are super close.
Yes.
Actually, thanks to the pandemic, we went to so many road trips as a family.
Because we had nothing better to do during the pandemic.
Yep. So we went to Joshua Tree, Ojai, Santa Barbara, Palm Springs, San Diego, so many places. So those trips also nurture our friendship, as well as we had the chance to talk deeper about how we can support startups.
I'll always remember our first road trip. We went to Joshua Tree together, and this guy takes out his speaker and starts blasting YouTube.
Of course, Joshua Tree.
Joshua Tree, and I'm like, we'll get along.
Yeah, that was the first road trip together. That was more than 3 years ago.
So that first time you guys met in the park for 12 hours, what was that conversation like? Was that when you kind of discovered the shared history, or was it more about like what you wanted to do, and where did the idea of like LaunchStarz specifically kind of emanate from?
Yeah, so the first time we met was all about like personal things. So we talked about where we came from, what I did, what he did. So we learned about each other, and we saw so many overlaps, even though we didn't meet each other until that time. The LaunchStarz idea came in actually probably 1 year later, when we seriously started thought about how we can support, since I was almost only Japanese who actually created a startup in the United States. So many Japanese people ask me, how did you do that? How did I do that? So like how to open a company, bank account, visa, everything, like hiring people, even firing people, and localizing your product, etc. So I've been doing this with Kenny in a like side project basis.
The side hustle.
Yeah. Like evening or weekends, just to use our time, not charging anything, just for fun, like pro bono style. So we have been doing this for the past 3 years until the government reached out to me last year, January. So I was selected in 2016, one of the startups from Japan, to be sent over to Silicon Valley for 2 weeks. So that program was called Hiyaku program, led by METI, the Ministry of Economy and Trade Industry, Keizai Sangyosho. So I was kind of one of the startups only who created a US entity and did the business. So government officers also wanted to hear from me. So I had a good connection in the past 8-7 years. Whenever those higher elite comes to the LA, I kind of did the guide of what the startup ecosystem looks like and how I'm surviving there. So that brought us the opportunity. Like once this lady called Tsubaki-san was seconded from METI to Jetro LA 2 years ago, she reached out to me and she wanted to have some idea how she can create completely new startup program, which focus on the business actually in the US, rather than just doing like a corporate tour for 2 weeks and giving them like a, I would say, old school style training, and they go back to Japan and nothing happens.
So at that time, there weren't any hands-on training or like real life experience. It was more like they go there for 2 weeks, sit in a classroom setting, go on a tour to Meta and Google, And then a lot of the companies there would maybe come from like larger Japanese companies like Toshiba or Sony. And then they would go back after 2 weeks and continue their daily life.
Sadly, yeah.
Sadly.
So she wanted to make a big change on difference. And after I had a call with her, I just called him. Hey, Kenny, it's time. It's time to go.
I was at work like, oh yeah, this sounds exciting, but we have a family and we got bills. I was like, whoa, right? Because he's like, it's time, let's do this.
Yep.
Yeah, it's time to make our own company.
Yes. So we had that idea that we wanted to do this sort of hands-on support for the Japanese startup from like 2-3 years ago. But we were seeking for the timing and opportunity, and we thought that this is the time. So in the first 4 months, we did double job.
Yeah, I think you were still working as CEO of Life Tech, and I was in charge of like the West sales and business development team for Zumper, which is like a property tech company, but it was more for millennials. So it's on your phone, you can book like short-term stays. So it's like Airbnb meets like Redfin or something. So it was very intense. I had like a full sales team, he had a full company. So basically we worked like all night or on the weekends. Or I'd be like on a business trip in Atlanta and I would do like 2 full days of like the trade show or conference. And then I'd tell my team like, oh, sorry, I got to go back to my room. At 6, I'd order Uber Eats and log on a call with him. And I'd be working from like 6 o'clock Atlanta time to midnight because it'd be 3 o'clock your time.
It was a perfect.
Yes.
And there's one time where I was so sick after all my trips, I had like 2 eye infections. So we couldn't work, but we had a deadline. So we went to the park again and sat in the park so he wouldn't get sick. And I was like trying to
finalize everything.
roll everything out. So, but it paid off. It worked out.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's awesome, first of all, that you had the kind of, like they say, right, luck is like preparation meets opportunity equals luck, right? That's like success. And you had the preparation just through your history, like it's kind of like Slumdog Millionaire, right? Where it's like he knew everything that was like all the answers to the questions because of the life he lived. And then when you got that call from Jetro, you're like literally like it's time, and you both had the grit. I guess is what I would say.
The grit, and also through. That our wives are probably not too pleased with us for those 3 to 4 months too.
Yeah, in the beginning
we had to balance family life as well as startup life. And I think that's something at our age, we're like, oh yeah, we have families now too. Because back in the day when it's just
only
us,
me or you,
we just like, 24/7.
Yeah, so I think it's awesome. It's really impressive. I think, you guys, you did it. I understand that time difference is always just killer. And so like, I can imagine what you were going through. And so how did you design kind of like, you got that call from Jetro. How did you design like the service that you were going to provide to startups? And like, what is that? What does that look like now?
I think we knew what we wanted to begin with, and we kind of reverse engineered it. So like, Satoshi lived it in real time when he first came to the States. So he'd always describe it. His analogy would be like, he's a guy walking in a dark room and there's just a ton of potholes, and he just keeps falling in. And no one tells him, and he's trying to climb out. And then by the time he climbs out, and he's like, okay, I got it, he falls into another one. So the first thing to reverse engineer is like, hey, what are the potholes for Japanese startups? Right. One could be having a trusted ecosystem. That could be for HR, for sales, for setting up an office, for Visa, right? And you had to do that all
everything by myself.
Right. And another one could be, hey, how do we actually help them prioritize what's important to them? So for one, a lot of times the Japanese startups like, I'm going to go to the States. Okay, I'm going to go set up a company. I'll make it in Delaware, and then I'm going to use my $1 million or $2 million funding and get an office and hire someone in sales, and then I'm going to do it. But that's not the way it is these days, because a lot of times, whatever product you have in Japan, like they may have not even tested or done market research in America. So they think that it works here, but it doesn't work here. So a lot of times we're like, whoa, slow down. Like, have you done market research? Have you pitched to VCs in America before? Because as we know, Japanese pitch decks could be much longer with a lot of text, a lot of data, and like compared to an American VC that could be 5 slides, 3 points, 1 call to action, and like we know exactly what you're talking about, right? And I think, and that confidence too. I think Satoshi and I always talk about how if there's an A-class Japanese startup with an amazing product, and a C-class American startup, if they go and pitch together in the States, unfortunately, that C class is going to always beat out that A class, even though they have that product. So it's all those things for training that we wanted to put in, but we couldn't do all of it. So it was creating this like program where we would be doing the hands-on stuff for each of the startups, but at the same time, they would still have an opportunity to work in workshops, networking parties, and whatnot with the local accelerators. So we ended up partnering with 3 local accelerators.
Yeah,
you want to talk about them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before diving into the program itself, I wanted to supplement him what he said. We felt that there are 2 big problems for the Japanese entrepreneurs. One is like it's very common mistakes. Like they don't know the difference, the huge difference between Japanese culture and U.S. culture. That includes the language, but also the business etiquette. So that's like a common, things we trained foundation. But at the same time, we knew that depending on the founders or entrepreneurs' language, English level, or understanding on the U.S. market level, they need different support. So we wanted to make sure that we provide the customized hands-on support. So that's like one of the things that we truly
Like the core.
Yeah, core. Like
LaunchStarz.
right. So we don't want to do any cookie cutter trainings. We actually talk to each founders. So that's our style. So that's why he said we partnership with local accelerators, where they can provide, I would say, broad training, which is very valuable.
Important.
And also the network to the local VCs or business partners, which probably is larger than we do. So that was a good combination. So that's what we did when we built the program.
I think one other piece too is you probably see on our laptops. There's a kanji here, and it means kokorozashi. So kokorozashi is having like that passion or fire or that motivation to succeed, which we pretty much just embraced when we were trying to make the company. So even though there's some Japanese startups where English isn't their best or they don't have the best product, but if they have kokorozashi, if they have passion, we are so happy to support them. And we've seen it happen in real life where they may not be the best English speaker, they may not do the best pitch, but when they came to the States and they worked hard, like you could see them actually have their own aha moment and change. And if they embraced that, they did really well.
Yeah, really well. So about the program.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing is we selected about 60 startups to actually come to United States with 3 cities. One is LA, and second one was San Diego, and third one is Austin. So in each city, we partnership with Plug and Play with LA, UC San Diego and San Diego, and which is one of the boutique accelerator called Q Branch in Austin. So they're much more focused in, I would say, federal system and hardware, military.
Big hardware.
So we had like a good diversity among those 3 cities. But the program-wise, we did the application process, and we went through all the applications and the pitch deck, and we watched the video.
We did it all. Basically. We designed the program, and then at the same time, we had to find the best startups. So we stayed up pretty much all night watching all the pitch videos, going through all the decks. There's some
that was fun.
Very interesting pitch decks too. But after we were able to go through that, then we could pare them down to the first domestic, and domestic meaning they do an online kind of remote training in Japan with us before we pare it down again. And a couple things to add. So this is the first year we ran it. It was called the Beyond Japan program. And the unique part about it is the government funded all the startups that made it to come to America. They funded their airplane ticket and also hotel. So it's kind of like, hey, we believe in you. So we had a very important job to actually pare down to find the best startups that would be able to make use of the time wisely when they come to the States.
So they were able to stay in the States up to 8 weeks last year.
Yeah, which is long.
Yeah, 2 weeks, or either 2 weeks, or 4 weeks, or 8 weeks, according to their schedule and also their, I would say, potential to be successful in the United States. So that was like an overview of this Beyond Japan program.
I like the concept of being very like white glove, like hands-on with the startups you're working with, and I hadn't really realized that maybe accelerators were more that broad education, and so it's kind of interesting to hear that angle and how that difference is. And so was the government support, was that provided through JETRO or was that provided through MEDI, or is that?
So the government we are directly working with is a JETRO LA. Yeah. But as he said, we planned everything and we executed everything on behalf of them.
Okay.
But also they're the our customers.
Yes, yes.
So we closely work
we
with them.
took in all their feedback to make
Yep.
sure that it's actually follows their vision, and also since it's executed by Jetro LA, it's still the funding comes from Meti. Yeah, so we want to be mindful that hey, we're following through your vision, but at the same time, working with Saki-san, she had the vision of trying to do something so new that I think we were very lucky to partner with her because we were able to kind of break the regular mold of a government type, a government-funded startup project.
Yes.
Can you give some examples of the startups you worked with?
Yeah, I would love to. I think some of them that stood out was some of them were really focused on helping the elderly because in Japan there's the aging population. So I think that's something that they truly wanted to make to help people first, as opposed to just make a product to make money. And a few of them, so one of them has a waved soundbar, and that wave soundbar helps to really amplify the treble. So when they're watching a movie or watching news, in the past when they go back for a New Year's holiday, their grandma would crank the volume super loud and everyone's like, I can't stand it. Now they can have it all in one volume and she can hear it and everyone can hear it everywhere in the room. So that was a great product that we actually helped them throughout the process. They actually launched on Black Friday in Amazon, which is amazing. And then another one too was it's fall prevention. And I was really interested in what this guy had. The founder had these special tiles or carpet that was able to absorb when elderly people fell. So absorb the shock. So everywhere we went, he'd love to do a live demo. So he'd lay down and like he'd get into it and like fall down and show like how it works. And I thought those two for me was very interesting.
Right.
And then
Another one I was interested in was there was one startup in San Diego who were the spine surgeries
They're both spinal surgeons
surgeons.
in Kanazawa University.
Yes, but we didn't know until the end. So we thought that they're from just Kanazawa, and
They're so humble. They didn't
super.
tell us they're the top spinal surgeons in Kanazawa.
Both of them, two founders.
Yeah, they're really good guys.
So in the beginning, they struggle with speaking English, but they work so hard. So after 2 weeks, they become a great pitch. I would say they become very good at the pitching to the VCs or whatever exhibitions, and they won one of the awards during the conference in San Diego.
And we didn't realize that because we only met one of the founders in San Diego, and the other founder was in Kanazawa. But then after the San Diego cohort finished, we still keep in touch with all of them. So the other founder who in Kanazawa happened to be flying through LA and he wanted to come thank us for like the program. So he stopped by our office. And that's when he told us that he couldn't come because he was covering all of that guy's surgeries. And then now he's coming in, that guy is covering all his surgeries. And I'm like, how do you guys sleep? And how are people like getting surgeries in Kanazawa for this spine?
Surreal.
Yeah, so we were like, wow, I thought we hustled, like mind blown. Like, you guys are so humble and you guys are covering each other's surgeries to basically come up with this new technology that can actually help like put an implant into the spine and it kind of blows up a little bit like a balloon so that it can help straighten the spine.
Right, it's amazing.
Yeah.
But not only that.
There's more.
No, not only that, they were so interesting because they said, I asked them, wasn't it hard for you guys to come to the States?
Yeah.
They said, actually, it was harder to go to Tokyo from Kanazawa.
Why?
So the mindset, I think the mindset was so hard for them from Inaka in Kanazawa to come to countryside to the big city.
Yeah.
Once they did that, it was less intimidated to come to the States. So that was another reason that's why I still remember them.
That's actually a good example. Yeah.
That's surreal. Yeah, I think, man, I love all three of those. I think that Japan, I've talked about this before, it's come up before on this podcast where right now is kind of a great time for those types of products because Japan having an aging population actually like the world is headed in that direction and Japan is like at the forefront of that. And so like all of these solutions, it's funny because like it's easy to look at Japan and be like, oh, they have a lot of old people. It's kind of an isolated case, but like we're all heading that way, and like
Yeah.
everywhere, like birth rates are declining kind of everywhere, and like and so to see like kind of these seeds being planted now and like where that can grow in the future is really awesome. And so I think it's awesome that you guys highlighted those products specifically.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so I have a couple. I think there's kind of two threads that we can go or pull on from here.
Okay.
And so the first one is the startup ecosystem in America and how it differs from Japan, and just what you've seen in both of those, and like what leads to success in both of those, and then maybe look at like specifically in America what you've seen lead to successful startups. So maybe we start with what the differences are, and then we can kind of go into like the success factors.
Sure, sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can kick it off. So I think the ecosystem in America is much more mature. So mature being that they've had a lot more get-togethers, or they have more networking parties where I think it's very organized. So it's very specific of who and what they want to find and what they want to do. And I think that Japan is starting to do that, and they're kind of in earlier stages. But we were actually really impressed with Sushi Tech. So we came for the second day, and I've lived in Japan since 1999. I did my startup in 2009. I'm like, this is what I wanted. Like when I launched my startup in 2009, I had to go to TechCrunch to do it.
Yeah.
So I thought that's amazing that like everything was done in English. They had great panelists. The people at the booths were trying their best to speak in English to pitch. And I think that's a really good start. And also a great start where they had all these side events to have networking. I think the biggest difference is that in America, all those networking events are much more focused of what they need, and people going there, they know what they want to get. I think in Japan, it's still kind of like practicing your pitch, or what is it that I really want? Like we're exchanging our LinkedIn's or our cards, but what is the next step? What's the call to action? And I think that's one of the differences that I noticed.
That's a good point. Yeah, and also related to that, the difference Japan and the US, I feel the VC ecosystems are totally different. That relates to how VCs prefer to be pitched by the entrepreneurs.
Sure.
And also, I think the biggest thing from like a little bit higher viewpoint is there are so many VCs in the United States who actually did the startup by themselves. But here in Japan, very few. Most of them are like a VC, corporate VCs.
You're pitching to SoftBank.
Right, right.
Very financial.
Maybe it's a little bit aggressive to express in this way, but sometimes the corporate VCs are similar to like a bank. They prefer not to take risks, although they're supposed to take risks with the entrepreneurs. So I think that's like another thing when I see.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I also think that it's the experience of the Japanese startups here to the experience of Japanese startups in America. Japanese startups, it's really interesting. When they got selected, they're super excited, and they're like, Kenny, Satoshi, when I go there, I want you to get me a meeting with Kleiner Perkins, AZ16, and we're like, whoa. Like, it's not on our fingertips, and that's one. And two, it's by industry, and also three, have you done your market research? Have you done all the steps to prepare before you even ask someone to introduce, not just to like Kleiner Perkins, any VC, right? And we're trying to educate or kind of let them know, like, I love your passion, but you need to pull back a little bit and be like, hey, before any of us introduce you to any VC, it's about your name in the industry. It's about your trust. We need to do our due diligence. You need to do your preparation before we even sit down and go over this and go, okay, I think this is a good VC because of their industry, because of their track record, and because you've done your research. And I think that's the gap where they're like, I want to skip like a whole bunch of steps and just go right there and pitch.
True.
That we've realized.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. But it's fun to actually talk to them. They're like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what they learn throughout the course then.
Yes. So most of the cases, the first week is more about our discovery call with them to get to know who they are and what they are passionate about and also what are their priorities in the US.
We actually do a lean canvas with them.
Yeah.
So their homework is, the traditional lean canvas where they have to fill everything out in English. We take a look at it and then we start highlighting the points of where we feel that they should focus on.
Well, we ended up talking about the gap between US and Japan first, so that we can fully focus on the business.
True.
Yeah.
But they want to jump over
exactly.
and go right to the business.
So we need to kind of manage the expectations in a way that they fully understand, oh, it's different from Japan.
For you, from your perspective, why do you think it's important that Japanese companies expand into America? Or also, I guess it's kind of there's 2 points there. Where the other side could be, do you get a lot of those type of companies that you're describing now, where they just want to meet with VCs in America, or like where does that kind of land?
Good question. I think that in the past, Japanese startups were just fine to stay in Japan because they were getting the Japanese VC funding, they're being successful, they're making good revenue, they're getting their Series A and B and C. But I think now, with the economy and also the yen being so weak, especially with the US dollar, I think they're starting to think like, hey, if I'm going to put all this effort in and I haven't got funded here, I might as well go like all in and go to the States and make my company there and get funded. And that's the biggest market anyways that I want to test in. So I think that part is changing, which is why they're starting to do that now. And I think before it was just safer to be here in Japan. And then they also had a lot of those Japanese companies that they're looking at, oh, they got pretty good funding and they're doing well. I don't need to move forward. And I think we talked about this earlier today about it could also be Japanese VCs that are
holding back startups to go global. Because think about it, if they're raising money here in Japan, the VC's point is just make profitable in the market they're used to. So it's very important for the entrepreneurs to actually do the due diligence for the VCs if they are aligned with your passion or vision.
That risk tolerance that you're
risk tolerance, also the understanding of the expanding their business in global market.
So kind of following along there, what do you see as like the biggest challenges? Like you've mentioned English has come up, presentation skills have kind of come up. You mentioned that difference in VCs. What other maybe internal and external barriers and challenges have you guys seen for startups, Japanese startups launching in America?
I can kick it off internal and external. So internal, it's a mindset. It's all about mindset. I feel that's why we try to provide as many opportunity or experience as possible for the entrepreneurs to actually expose themselves in the overseas environment. And also even listening to the other startup founders who actually went to America or wherever, so that they can see and hear, oh, it looks like that, rather than just read a book or article. So that's one.
2 weeks classroom.
Exactly. Internal. I think they need to change their mindset. That's why we focus on those opportunities. External wise, as you said, I think the language barrier is very big, to be honest. And also there's no, I would say, poster boys or poster ladies for the startups to look for.
To look up to and be like, I want to be like them.
So for example, for the baseball, Shohei Ohtani is doing great. He's a great superstar. So that's like one of the great example in the players who plays baseball. But for startups,
who is that?
Exactly.
To kind of carry on from what Satoshi said is, I also think that it's the ecosystem and it's the people, other startup founders that support each other. And I think we started to realize and see this, that from our previous Beyond Japan program, we have 60 companies, 60 alumni that are so close that when we talk to the San Diego's guys, joke around, they're like, we have a Slack chat, and like we still message each other, we get on calls, and these are all CEOs, like once a week. And then the Spinal guy always jokes, he's like, I actually have to mute mine because you guys are way too noisy. So he's a joker. Or like even the LA cohorts where they're so close, they get together, and the crazy story for one is, one of the startups got, the CEO was really having a good conversation with another CEO, and he actually had a lot of good knowledge to help her. And after the Beyond Japan program, he actually became on the board of her company to help her, and then he's still running his own. So it's like this tight-knit ecosystem. I don't think you get that in Japan unless like you go on tour like they do in LA and San Diego, and they go through 2 weeks of hell together, and then they bond and they become tight, and they can share everything with each other. I don't think they have that here. So I think doing that experience has helped them. So we have 60 alumni from last year. We're going to have another 60 this year. And like every year, we want to build on that. And I think they'll grow stronger that way.
I agree.
Creating that community, that's something, it's funny because I don't know if that was like baked into the initial plan, but that's like one of those things that's like it's actually a huge benefit. And I think that's like, down the line, that's going to be a selling point for LaunchStarz always, is to be having access to that alumni network, and like that's awesome. And so it's interesting that you say, I remember when we were talking to Casey, who was our founder, Casey Wahl, one of the things he mentioned before was like the startup ecosystem in Japan was always a little bit formal, maybe.
Yeah.
And so to hear you kind of talk about how you've created that community in sort of a more friendly and welcoming environment, it's really interesting. It's interesting to see like how far it's come and how you guys can provide that.
I think initially our vision was to have the alumni, but it kind of exceeded our expectations when we came on this trip. We had seminars to promote the 2024 program Beyond Japan. So we had the alumni come in and they were sitting there on a panel and they had to describe their experiences. And just the chemistry between them on the panels, we could see like they spent a lot of time, had a lot of deep conversations. And then after all of them finished, we went for lunch and we're sitting in the lunchroom. And it was the first time the San Diego cohorts met the LA ones, or the LA met the Austin ones. But all of them clicked, and they're like, we should make a bigger group. Like, they were joking around, like, they're sharing experiences where San Diego was like, yeah, our course was hell. And then, like, the other guys in LA is like, you guys had homework? And, like, like they're laughing. He's like, we had homework, like, so much. So they're comparing, but then it was like this really great synergy that we haven't really seen. Because, like you said, it's very formal, where in Japan, everyone kind of, like, is guarded with whatever knowledge or mistakes, or they don't want to show the mistakes that they made, and that's very hard. But here it was an open safe space to be like,
and also they had the common, I would say, obstacles or needs among those startups or founders who actually came to the States. Because everybody struggled with the pitch. Or getting the lead.
Everyone struggled with doing homework at night and then running their Japanese business after that till midnight.
I think that also tightened the bond of them.
But they still found time to have some drinks.
Yes.
Of course.
Of course.
It's America. You got to do that. And so you mentioned there a little bit about maybe some of the mistakes that they share. What have been some of like the biggest mistakes that you guys have seen? Like startup founders make, or startups who are launching in America make?
Yeah, that's the easy one.
I think that was a theme during the seminar we had with all the alumni. I think the biggest theme was when they got selected, they didn't know what they were going into. They didn't know how intense it was, and they also didn't know what the Beyond Japan program could offer. So all of them pretty much had the same conclusion where I wish I prepared more. I wish actually I had like a tack list and like started reaching out to potential partners or VCs. I wish I like did more due diligence of, if I'm going to go here, like what kind of market research should I do? I think those pieces of preparation, which is a learning for us, which we can share with all the startups this year to be more prepared, was probably one of the biggest takeaways.
From the program perspective. But for the startups perspective, I would say hiring. They tend to hire one person full-time right after they come to the States, before even though they have the playbook for the sales. And
that's where we step in.
Yes, we did the same.
What is the first? When you hire first full-time person? What type of person?
So let's say salesperson, sales manager. You pay $200K per year, which is not like small amount.
For an American sales director who has no idea what your product is.
Yes.
Or Japanese culture.
And exactly. And the founder has no experience managing American. And American has no experience working with Japanese.
And the American getting paid that much is just going to say yes.
Yes.
For everything to the founder.
And they have no clear JD. Which is completely opposite of the American culture versus Japanese culture. So we've seen so many startups ended up just firing them or
after 3 months.
They resign. So ended up they rehire other managers. So we advise the startup founders that before you hire any full-time employee, you should start small, like part-time or contractor, or even before hiring the part-time employees.
Especially California. Because California is at will, so just those rules alone is very difficult for a Japanese co-founder to understand when they come.
Hiring that's why we exist. It's a big challenge.
You gave a great shout out.
Right? Exactly. I mean, it's something. It's funny because we usually see it the other way, right? As like American companies coming in, and usually they'll like say, okay, like the first thing we have to do is like, we just need to go direct. We just need like customers. So like, let's just hire a sales manager, and they kind of don't understand that. For us, what we've seen is like, it's a very partnership driven market, and there's a lot of really big players. And like specifically, I was working in ad tech, and there's like Dentsu and Hakuhodo and CyberAgent, and if you're not paying homage to them, like you're probably not gonna make it. If you don't play nice with the agencies, like there's no hope almost. And like they use the same playbook that's worked in the EU or in America, and like we're just gonna sell direct to all of our customers, and it's like there's barriers and gates that a lot of gatekeepers keep in Japan, and so so hearing kind of like that opposite where like they're hiring someone and not knowing Japanese culture, not knowing how to operate, what the product is even, and so it's interesting. It's an interesting
I think
comparison.
when you mentioned playbook,
Yeah.
that's what they should be focusing on first, and that's what actually we're helping the startups do. So if you think about a startup coming into the U.S. to Los Angeles, they have $2 million funding. They spend their money on office and they spend $200,000 on a sales director, right? And then that's like burning their runway without getting any output, right? So they hire the sales director, but they have no customers. But they're paying someone $200,000 without any sort of incentive plan that would kind of match what would work in the States, right? And then with that being said, instead of that, we actually recommend them hiring either like us or someone in the ecosystem that's skilled in sales to create a playbook. Create an attack list of tier 1, 2, and 3 companies that you want to go after. Focus on your tier 3 as your experimental playbook, right? So how does it do your testing of emails, cold calls, whatever in your tier 3, till you refine it and you get one customer, then go for tier 2, then go for the big fish tier 1.
Exactly.
Right, and that's how we build out the playbook, and that's a lot easier for a Japanese founder and Japanese sales team to understand. Right? Okay, I got my win. I use this win to get others, and I follow this playbook. But if you hire a sales director for $200,000 to create the playbook, he can't do it.
Zero.
Get the big customer, he can't do it. He or she can't do it. So that's where we've started to see that gap.
Especially if they're getting paid $200K, they're going to think they have to go for those tier 1 clients, and then and when they fail, it's like
it's
there's
the
nothing to
opposite.
show for.
Actually.
Yeah, exactly.
And also, if they're getting $200K, they're like, I got pretty good salary. Like even if I pull in the big one or not, I'm getting $200K, right?
That's
So
another
like,
thing.
I'm getting 120, and then if I get the big one,
That's
I'm
a
getting
different one. The Japanese startups are not used to the incentive plan.
Yes.
That's a big one too. And also, once we have the playbook, it's much easier to create JD because they know what skill they need.
That's another good point too. Hiring in Japan,
They don't have
especially
JD.
as a freshman, they all come in as generalists with no JD. But then when we started, we're like, your most important thing is to define your JD because that is how it's going to define whether you fire them or not if they hit their KPI. And I think that's another gap.
Right,
too.
there's a gap.
Yeah, so those are like a couple, like 2 of the best practices tips. So hiring right, defining the playbook. Any other tips or best practices you would give startups launching in America?
Yeah, my number 1 is LinkedIn.
Oh yeah.
Get ready your LinkedIn profile and get at least 100 connections. People won't meet you if you have only 10 connections.
So that's what the alumni
picture.
said. They're like, it was pretty tough when I was in Los Angeles with only 2 connections, as I tried to add all my friends before I could get a meeting. So it takes time. That's a good one. Use LinkedIn and please try to get off Facebook Messenger.
Yeah, 100%. That's a good, small one, but
I think another big advice I have is that even though you think that your product is so amazing in Japan, sometimes the founders are blinded, or sometimes it could be ego, that my product is the best. Competitive advantage, hands down, I will win. But that's in Japan, right? And then they don't actually prioritize market research, and they don't prioritize actually like if it's a B2C product and you need to do customer research, some of the startups that were younger ones, like college students, they went onto the UCLA campus and USC campus and went and talked to every person. But then there's other startups where maybe he's a little older, he has people in Japan already here, and he's like, that's beneath me. I'm not gonna go do that groundwork and talk to people. But eventually, I think all of them realized if you want to understand your market, you need to be in your market. You need to be talking to people, as many people. You need to be creating events where people come in.
Yes.
And I think that's one part that they realized.
True. And it's very important to actually validate their competitive advantages. Even though it's same as Japan, it's good to talk to your customers.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that it's funny because I wanted to say this a bit earlier too when you're talking about, I think that the image of starting a new company can seem it's like a dream, you know, like, and maybe it is like the Shohei Ohtani example might actually be really good because you see him play baseball and you're like, I want to do that. I can do that. And it's like, there's levels and the depth at which you can get to based on like your passion, based on your mindset, like you kind of define where it's going to end. And I think when you're starting a company, I've never started a company, so I actually don't know. But this is like, from what I'm learning from you guys today is like, it's a lot of grinding and it's a lot of grit that it takes, and you have to be in the trenches, especially at the beginning. And so to hear that you were able to kind of teach even like where this kind of stereotypical, maybe classic Japanese business person who they have like this reputation of being like you mentioned, like this is beneath me. And then being able to kind of show them that they need to like that they learn that they have to be in there and actually doing the footwork themselves is like it's impressive. It's impressive and awesome to hear.
I think we're almost like proud parents too, because that person that said this is beneath me, actually, it was his turning point. He worked so hard, and then even though he didn't get funded in the States, after he came back, he got funded in Japan. And everyone was like, wow, that's amazing. And in the alumni network, it was buzzing. Everyone's like, how'd you do it? But then I think he made that decision himself as a turning point, right? I think the turning point was when we were talking with him, and we were like, so who's making these emails, your sales emails? He's like, my staff in Japan. And I'm like, have you taken a look at them? And he looked at them, he's like, yeah, I think I should like change that. So like it was like that moment where we talked with him.
Right.
And then
He realized
it, but he embraced it.
Yeah.
To change it instead of I'm not going to listen to you guys. Yeah, and I think that made us super happy to hear that he got funded here because it's like just because you do stuff in the States and you don't get immediate like success or outputs, it still comes. Because he still has the mindset.
There's still value, like the experience.
He's putting in the work.
I agree.
That's awesome. So that's all the questions I have. Any final thoughts you guys want to share? And then also like, where can people get in touch?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I guess the final thoughts is we're in Japan right now. And one of the main things is to promote the Beyond Japan 2024 program. It was very successful last year, so we actually added a new city. So not only is it in Los Angeles, Austin, San Diego, but the fourth city is Denver. So Denver is going to focus on space tech, which is kind of like the big buzzword right now in the States. And the cool part too is we have 4 accelerators. So it's the same accelerators that worked with us last year. In Los Angeles, it's Plug and Play. In San Diego, it's UC San Diego. And then in Austin, it's Q Branch. And then the 4th accelerator is TechStars in Denver.
So that's interesting, space tech. I actually hadn't heard about this at all. Are there any other trends that people should be aware of? Like that they like if they're developing a product and thinking about launching in America, are there any other buzzwords like that they should be targeting?
That's a good question. I think last year space was a really hot topic because we had VCs and companies coming in from Europe that
to
were
LA.
Networking parties in LA. And I think another big deal is the Gitai and all the Japanese kind of space-related startups are actually in El Segundo.
El Segundo is in LA.
In LA, yeah.
So now LA and Denver are becoming like a 2 hot spots in the States if you're in the space area, space tech area.
Interesting. Are there any other like broad strokes, trends like space tech? You mentioned also, I think I don't know how you define it, but like the startups you mentioned before that kind of med tech, but it's like specifically for older people. Like, is there a name for that?
Because there are quite a lot of companies that
you could make a name
focusing on like the. Was it like age tech, aging tech?
Yeah.
Like, I can't remember what the term is, but you're right, like aging tech or technology for the elderly. That is actually quite a big focus. And then I think the other one is anything to do with like the environment. There's a lot, but then I think the scale of that is so big. It's very hard to really focus on what your product is and make it successful.
True.
Do you know any other trends that you can come to?
No, I think the space is the biggest one so far we've seen in the past year.
Nice. And so what is the best place to reach out?
Yeah, so come to like Beyond Japan website, which we have b4d-jp.com. You can apply for the program. The deadline is the end of May, so it's coming soon. So I will encourage everybody to
we can
apply.
share kind of the homepage with you,
Yeah,
and then
we'll put it in the description.
yeah. Also, if anyone of your listeners want to follow our socials, because we actually share a lot of mentors and programs and
talks.
Q&As and talks on there.
Nice.
So I think the main piece of what we want to do is to continue to build the ecosystem, but not just in Japan and not just in America. It's like, how do I figure out a way to combine it? Because I still think the ecosystem in Japan between the foreigners and the Japanese, there's still a divide. And we're trying to find a way to bring them together to work in a more collaborative way. And that's something that we touched on early in the podcast, is that there are all these great Japanese startups. And then we all know that some of them, sometimes it could be language, sometimes it could be confidence, sometimes it could be the pitch. But there's also all these foreigners that want to work in a Japanese startup, that have the passion. So how do we like give them a space so that they can join forces, obviously organically? And I think they'll be so much stronger. And I think we're a prime example of that, where he's Japanese, he speaks English, understands America. I'm American,
speaks Japanese,
understands
Japanese culture.
Understands Japanese culture. And then together, it's funny because when we talk to the startups, it's like, if we weren't together as a team, I think we'd grow like so much slower. But together, we're able to build this program in like a year or less than a year.
That's a great point.
And that's what you can do with your startup. If you do that.
And speaking non-Japanese people, like foreigners, Beyond Japan program is also open to the foreigners as well, if you live here or paying tax here.
That's true. So you said you haven't done your startup. So you live here, Brian. You can apply by the end of
Why
May.
Why not?
For the Beyond Japan program.
We're here to support you.
That'll be the next episode. It'll be like my own personal podcast.
We'll follow your journey of the Beyond Japan program.
That'll be the best.
That'd be great.
As a foreigner that started his startup.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Thank you guys for being here. And hopefully we'll talk again soon. Maybe next time you guys are in Tokyo and we can get an update on the new startups that you guys are helping.
Definitely. Yeah, thanks so much for your time. It was a lot of fun talking to you.
Thanks so much for your time.
Kenny and Satoshi, thank you guys.
Thank you.